Hello YouTube, welcome back to another easy prepping video. Today is a, very serious topic. I'm covering what I think you should do to prepare for the event of a nuclear attack. Whether that attack be a small, what's called a suitcase bomb by a terrorist, or a major all-out nuclear war between one of the major powers. There's every variable in between. But first, to do in advance, I think, build an emergency kit. I did a whole video on what I think you should have in your fallout shelter, and I will attach a link here to that video. But just a brief, quick rundown is bottled water, packaged food, emergency medicines, radio, one being either battery, hand crank, both, flashlights, and extra batteries for anything on that list you're depending on to be battery driven. Next, I think you should have a family preparedness plan. In the event of a nuclear attack, how far the fallout's going to go and how serious it's going to be has a lot of variables, which I plan on covering here shortly. But know in advance where your fallout shelters are. Check with your community and have a family plan, because it's likely that your family could be scattered all over the place, and that fallout will probably start coming down, well, not after 10 minutes, 15 minutes or longer, depending on a lot of variables. But they won't have time to get home. You won't have time to get home. You'll kind of have to seek shelter near where you're at. And getting home is worry about later, and discuss that with your family. But know how to shelter in place for where you normally go, your work, your school, your church even. But have a plan and make sure your family and everybody in your family knows the details of the plan. If you happen to be caught outside or just outside of a structure, shelter, during a nuclear attack, your priorities should be, well, if warned, get to the nearest building. And in that building, stay away from the windows, because it's likely there's a shock wave coming. If outdoors, lay down, face down, cover your face with your arms as best you can. There could be a lot of debris flying. If you're in a vehicle, just hunker down in that vehicle. Get down below the windows, duck down in the vehicle as best you can. And get inside a secure facility as much as you can before the fallout starts. Worst case scenario would be about 10 minutes. You have that long. And you should look for a bigger building, concrete, brick, basement in that building, and multi-story building inside. So elevator shafts are normally inside. Get in or near those. But stay away from the outside, stay away from windows. And you can think of fallout as kind of like a real fine sand that's going to be coming down. Next, just a little bit about blast radius, how you could be affected depending on how close you are. There are too many variables. You're going to have to look at your own area. How close are you to a potential site that would be attacked? And biggest thing after that is how big the explosion would be. There's everything from, like I said, suitcase bombs, which would be low kiloton range, even what they call dirty bombs, up to, well, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated was by Russia. It's one they called the Tsar Bomba. It was 50 megaton. We're going to base the information I have here. I wrote up on a 1 megaton detonation. So kind of hit the middle of the road, so to speak. And once again, there's too many variables. Things depend on, well, first of all, the size. Secondly, the weather. If it's raining, you could get something called black rain, and you'd have that, and more than the just fallout, which would be like the fine gritted sand. Either way, get out of it, get away from it. The time of day. I think this would mainly affect well, it's the flash blindness that comes off the light. During the day, flash blindness, you could have up to 13 miles from a 1 megaton detonation. And at night, up to 52 miles from a 1 megaton detonation. And from what research I have done, in most cases, this flash blindness is temporary. Now, the heat off of a 1 megaton blast, you could suffer first-degree burns to any exposed skin up to 7 miles away. Third-degree burns up to 5 miles away. And from what little research I did here, the third-degree burns on, I think it's like 25% of your body is 40% chance you're going to die. And you don't want those burns. If you have any warning at all, duck and cover. Now, the blast wave, from what I've learned here, could have 158 mile an hour winds with a hell of an impact on buildings up to about 4 miles out. And there, the human body can withstand that shock wave. Buildings can't. It's estimated that most of the injuries, deaths from the shock wave would actually be buildings falling on people that sought shelter or were just inside the building. I think the biggest thing to take into consideration for, well, most of us is avoiding the fallout after the leftover radiation. And as I said earlier, you should have a minimum of 10 minutes, probably not 15 or more. Depends on your distance, speed of the wind. Anyway, don't think you're safe because you're 100 miles away. That fallout, depending on the wind, the weather, could travel hundreds of miles, mostly downwind. So, know in advance where the potential targets are. As best you can, try to get inside the head of some of the world country leaders that have their thumb on a big red button. Where do you think they'll hit? Is it anywhere near you? What's the weather pattern? How does the wind blow most of the time? In my area here, it comes out of the northwest to southwest. Usually, we do get winds from different directions at different times, but as a general rule, it's mainly coming from the west to northwest. So that's the direction I look for being more prepared for what might detonate in that direction. Anyway, get inside. Preferably brick or concrete is best. Remove any contaminated clothing. This is anything that potentially has fallout on it. Put that clothing inside a plastic bag and get it away from people, animals, anything you don't want to be contaminated with radiation. It's another thing. Remember your animals, especially if they were outside, possibly have fallout on them. Wash them down. Get as much of it off as possible. Stay inside for at least 24 hours. All my research shows that's a minimum, that the radiation from fallout will dissipate about 80% within 24 hours. But if you want to be safer, it's recommended 2 weeks to 30 days, I guess, depending on the situation, for the fallout radiation to drop to about 1% of what it was at the detonation. So the longer you can stay inside your fallout shelter, the better. And next I have a list here of things you should consider for coping while you're stuck in your shelter, your fallout shelter. Anyway, first is, if possible, remain informed. That's what your hand crank radio, your battery operated radio is for. Don't count on your cell phone. Don't count on the internet being up, cell towers still working. But there are, especially AM 50,000 watt stations around the country called clear channels that are supposed to kick into emergency broadcast mode during any situation like we're discussing here. Next, avoid overexposure to any media. I made a video on how to be happy in your prepping, and the main point was turn off the TV, stop watching the news. Overexposure can be, quite frankly, I think, depressing, and you're not going to want that while you're trapped in your shelter. Pay attention to your emotional health. Monitor how you and especially the people around you are doing, because they might not be doing as well as you, and hopefully not, but you might have to take action on somebody else's mental health not being very stable. Monitor your physical health needs when sheltering in place. Remember to eat, drink, rest, and prescribed medicines. You should have some of those in your kit if you're on regularly prescribed medicines that you need. Make sure you keep taking them while you're in your shelter. One thing you can focus on, at least right away after the incident, to kind of distract, is take an inventory. Know what you have available in your shelter that's for you to use to get through this. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention you might want to have, falls under medical, but you can get it over the counter, is some potassium iodide. Check with your medical professional, but I've heard from several sources that potassium iodide can help your body fight off the effects of radiation. Now, in closing, I'd like to ask if you haven't already clicked the subscribe button, please do so. I try to put out informative videos, and if you subscribe, you should get more notice that I've put out a new video. If you like this video, think it was informative, please click that thumbs up button. If you know somebody you think could benefit from it, please click share. And following along the subject that there's just so many variables that you don't know, you need to look at worst case scenarios. If you plan for the worst case scenario, surviving, not being at ground zero, then you won't be surprised by being underprepared. And those of you who just want to comment that why bother, you're going to die anyway, don't bother. I'm talking to people who wish to survive. And as usual, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Thank you for watching.